The espresso machine's hiss punctuated the evening like an angry cat, steam rising and wispy tendrils that disappeared into the dim lighting of Cafe Milano. I wiped my damp hands on the black apron tied too tightly around my waist. My fourth double shift this week, evident in the dark circles beneath my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. My reflection in the polished chrome of the machine showed a woman I barely recognized anymore. Hollow-shaped, exhausted, invisible to the world except when someone needed their cup refilled. "Order up, Bella." Tony, our perpetually irritated chef, slammed the bell with unnecessary force, making me flinch. I balanced the plates along my arms with practiced precision, the weight familiar after years of carrying other people's needs. The cafe smelled of garlic, butter, and the lingering cologne of businessmen who thought their tips were generous when they barely covered my bus fare home. Rain pattered against the windows, turning Chicago's October evening into a watercolor of street lights and hurried shadows. That's when I first noticed him. He sat alone in the corner booth, the one reserved for special guests, though I hadn't seen Tony escort anyone there. The stranger's presence seemed to bend the air around him, commanding attention while simultaneously deflecting it. His suit wasn't just expensive. It was different, tailored to his broad shoulders in a way that spoke of European craftsmanship. Even from across the room, I could see his hands, strong, deliberate, adorned only with a single gold signet ring that caught the light when he turned the page of a leather-bound notebook. "Tea's been waiting 15 minutes, hissed Sharon, the senior waitress who never let me forget I was one mistake away from unemployment. Stopped daydreaming. I delivered the plates with apologies and forced smiles before approaching the corner booth, my heart inexplicably racing. As I drew closer, I caught his scent, something woodsy and exclusive, nothing like the department store samples my ex used to douse himself with. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Cafe Milano." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Can I get you something to drink while you look at the menu?" He looked up and my practiced waitress smile froze. His eyes were amber fleck, watchful like a predator's, surrounded by laughter lines that suggested warmth his expression didn't currently offer. Beneath perfectly groomed dark hair that showed the barest traces of silver at the temples, his face could have belonged on a Renaissance painting. All sharp angles and perfect proportions. "Beau," he said, his accent subtle but unmistakably Italian, each syllable deliberate. "Your oldest vintage." I hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll have to check if Tony keeps it for special occasions." The stranger didn't smile, but something shifted in his expression. "Tell him it's for Dante." The name rippled through the restaurant, though he'd spoken quietly. I noticed for the first time that Tony was watching our interaction with unusual intensity from the kitchen doorway. The normally loud dining room had subtly quieted. Conversations continuing, but with a new awareness like prey animals sensing a wolf among them. I nodded and retreated, feeling his eyes follow me across the room. Tony intercepted me before I reached the bar, his face uncharacteristically pale. "Whatever he wants, Bella, he gets. Understand. The best table, the best service." He gripped my arm with surprising strength. "And for God's sake, don't stare at him." "Who is he?" I whispered. Tony's laugh held no humor. "Someone who could buy this entire block and turn it to dust on a whim. Just serve him and keep your head down." I returned with a wine that cost more than my monthly rent, pouring it with hands that trembled slightly despite my best efforts. When our fingers brushed as I handed him the glass, an electric jolt shot through me. His hand was warm, the skin unexpectedly smooth, except for calluses I couldn't identify. "Thank you." His eyes lingered on my face, then dropped to my name tag, Isabella. The way he pronounced my full name, not the shortened version everyone used, sent a shiver down my spine. No one had called me Isabella since my grandmother passed away. "Just Bella is fine," I said immediately, regretting the correction when his eyebrow arched slightly. "I prefer Isabella." There was no room for negotiation in his tone. "It suits you better." The rest of my shift passed in a strange haze of awareness. No matter what table I served, my attention remained tethered to the corner booth where Dante sat, occasionally speaking in rapid Italian into a sleek black phone, his voice too low to catch actual words. Twice men in dark suits entered, spoke briefly with him, and left without ordering. The second man slipped him a small envelope that disappeared inside his jacket. By 11 o'clock, the restaurant had emptied, except for his table. Tony had already sent the kitchen staff home, but insisted I stay until our mysterious guest decided to leave. I wiped down tables and restocked silverware, hyper-aware of being watched, but not brave enough to meet his gaze directly. The bell over the door jangled harshly, breaking the silence. 3 men stumbled in, their loud voices and unsteady movements marking them as drunk before I even caught the sour smell of alcohol that accompanied them. "Kitchen's closed," I said automatically, moving toward them to block their path further into the restaurant. "We don't want food, sweetheart," the tallest one grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "Just a little conversation." I felt rather than saw Dante shift in his seat. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're closing. You'll need to leave." I kept my voice professional despite the sudden dryness in my mouth. The second man, wearing a leather jacket with 2 mini zippers, stepped closer. "Don't be like that. We just want to sit a while, right, boys?" Tony emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands nervously on a towel. "Gentlemen, please. We're closed." "Shut up, old man," snapped Zipper Jacket, his eyes never leaving my face. "We're talking to the pretty lady here." I took an instinctive step backward, bumping into a table. The water glasses I'd just filled wobbled dangerously. The single word cut through the tension. Quiet, but carrying the force of a gunshot. Dante hadn't risen from his seat, hadn't raised his voice, but the command in that one word was unmistakable. For the first time, the drunk men seemed to notice him, their bloodshot eyes widening as they took in his presence. "Mind your own business, fancy suit," said Goldtooth, though with noticeably less confidence. In one fluid motion, Dante stood, revealing his full height and the athletic build his tailored jacket had partially concealed. I won't repeat myself. I should have been relieved to have a defender, but something in his posture, the controlled violence of a cobra preparing to strike, frightened me more than the drunks. This wasn't a man used to being disobeyed. What happened next occurred so quickly, I had trouble processing it. Goldtooth reached inside his jacket. A metallic glint caught the light. My body moved before my mind could catch up. Years of protecting my younger siblings from our mother's violent boyfriends, triggering an instinctive response. I lunged forward, shoving Dante aside just as a deafening crack split the air. Fire erupted in my shoulder. A white-hot poker of pain that stole my breath and sent me stumbling backward. I heard more than felt the impact as my body hit the hardwood floor. The ceiling spinning above me as warm wetness spread across my chest. More gunshots followed, 3 in rapid succession, but they sounded distant underwater, shouting the crash of furniture, running footsteps. Through it all, I remained strangely detached, watching red bloom across my white blouse with academic interest. Then Dante's face appeared above me, his features transformed by a rage so pure it seemed to radiate heat. Gone was the controlled businessman, replaced by something ancient and terrifying. He barked orders in Italian, his hands now stained with my blood, cradling my face with incongruous gentleness. "Isabella," he said, my name a prayer and a curse simultaneously. "Why would you do that, stupid brave girl?" I tried to answer but could only cough, tasting copper. "Don't speak." His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "Help is coming. Stay with me." The last thing I registered before darkness claimed me was the press of his lips against my forehead and his whispered promise. "I will burn this city to the ground if you leave me now." I didn't understand why a stranger would care if I lived or died. I didn't understand the possessive fury in his voice. But as consciousness slipped away, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made a terrible mistake, not in taking that bullet, but in drawing the attention of a man who looked at me like I was already his. The chaos of sirens and shouting faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of Dante's heartbeat against my cheek as he lifted me into his arms. My last conscious thought was that I'd never felt so fragile and so safe at the same time. A contradiction that would come to define my entire existence from this moment forward. I drifted through fragments of consciousness like scattered puzzle pieces. Bright lights, urgent voices, the antiseptic smell of hospital corridors. Pain ebbed and flowed, sometimes distant, sometimes so sharp it jolted me from the comfortable darkness. Through it all, one constant remained. The sensation of someone holding my hand, a warm anchor in a sea of confusion. When I finally opened my eyes fully, sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across unfamiliar walls. This wasn't a hospital room, at least not like any I'd seen before. The space was expansive with high ceilings and what looked like genuine artwork hanging on soft blue walls. Fresh flowers perfumed the air, their vibrant colors almost offensive against the sterile whites and creams of medical equipment. "You're awake." The deep voice startled me. I turned my head, even that small movement sending ripples of pain across my shoulder, to find Dante sitting beside the bed. He'd exchanged his suit for dark jeans and a simple black button-down with rolled sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and adorned with a single elegant watch. Despite the casual clothes, he radiated the same dangerous energy I remembered from the restaurant. "Where am I?" My voice emerged as a rasp, my throat desert dry. He reached for a glass of water on the bedside table, his movements precise and controlled as he held it to my lips. "My home. Private wing." I sipped gratefully, trying to process his words. "Private hospital wing in your house." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "When you need medical attention as often as my associates do, it becomes a necessary investment." The water caught in my throat as memories flooded back. The gun, the searing pain, the sound of more shots after I fell. "The men who came in," I started, "are no longer a concern." His expression hardened, amber eyes turning to flint. "One is dead. The others will wish they were once they're found." The chill swept through me despite the plush blankets covering my body. The casual way he spoke of violence should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself more disturbed by my lack of horror. "How long have I been here?" 3 days. His jaw tightened. "You lost a significant amount of blood." "The bullet missed major arteries, but damaged muscle tissue." "The doctor says you were lucky." Wasn't the word I would have chosen. I attempted to sit up, gasping as pain lanced through my left shoulder. Instantly, his hands were there supporting me with surprising gentleness, arranging pillows behind my back. "You need to rest," he said, his face uncomfortably close to mine. "Recovery will take time." "I need to call work," I said, suddenly panicked. "Tony will fire me if I don't." Dante's laugh cut me off, a sound both genuine and unsettling. "Tony will not fire you. The restaurant is closed indefinitely for renovations, which it desperately needed anyway." The casual way he spoke of my workplace closing sent another wave of anxiety through me. My job at Cafe Milano barely covered my bills, but it was all I had. "I can't afford to lose that job," I whispered, hating the weakness in my voice. "I have rent due next week and my sister's tuition payment. Your financial concerns are resolved." He said it simply, as though informing me it might rain later. "Your apartment has been paid through the year. Your sister's education is covered. Your mother's medical bills are settled." I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. How did he even know about my family? About my mother's chronic health problems that had devoured my savings and driven me into debt? Why would you do that? My voice trembled between gratitude and suspicion. "You don't know me." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You took a bullet meant for me, Isabella. In my world, that creates a debt that can never truly be repaid." I didn't know what I was doing, I admitted. It was instinct, precisely why it matters. He leaned forward, his gaze intensifying. "Anyone can perform calculated heroics when weighing potential rewards. True character reveals itself in split-second decisions. You protected a stranger at risk to yourself." His hand moved to my face, fingertips tracing my cheekbone with a delicacy that belied their strength. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I wanted to look away, but found myself trapped in his gaze. Up close, I could see flecks of gold in his irises, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the day stubble darkening his jaw. He was older than I'd initially thought, late 30s perhaps, with fine lines etched by experiences I couldn't begin to imagine. A discreet knock at the door broke the moment. Dante straightened immediately, his expression closing like shutters. "Enter," he called, voice shifting to something harder. A man in a tailored suit stepped in, nodding respectfully to Dante before his eyes flickered to me with undisguised curiosity. "Sorry to interrupt, boss. Carlos is here with the information you requested." "I'll be right out," Dante replied, dismissing him with a slight gesture. The man retreated, closing the door silently behind him. "Boss," I echoed, feeling suddenly small in the large bed. Dante studied me for a long moment, calculation evident behind his steady gaze. I think you've realized I'm not simply a restaurant patron. Isabella, who are you? I asked, though I wasn't certain I wanted the answer. He stood, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from his shirt. Rest now. We'll talk more when you're stronger. The firmness in my voice surprised us both. I'm lying in your home, apparently indebted to you for things I never asked for. I deserve to know who you are. For a heartbeat, anger flashed across his features. The instinctive reaction of a man unaccustomed to being challenged. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. A genuine expression that transformed his face from intimidating to devastating. Dante Romano, he said, inclining his head slightly as though we were being formally introduced at a cocktail party rather than in a sick room. My family oversees certain business interests throughout the Midwest. The deliberate vagueness wasn't lost on me. You're in the Mafia. His smile didn't falter, though it took on an edge. Such an American term. We prefer familia. Family. A hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest, sending fresh pain through my shoulder. I took a bullet for a Mafia boss. This can't be happening. And yet here we are. He checked his watch. I must attend to some matters. Rico will be outside your door if you need anything. Try to rest. Wait, I called as he reached the door. When can I go home? He paused, his back to me, shoulders tensing almost imperceptibly. When it's safe. From what? He turned, his expression unreadable. The men who came to the restaurant weren't random drunks, Isabella. They were sent by someone who wants me dead. Someone who now knows your face. Cold dread settled in my stomach. Because I helped you. Because you saved me. His voice softened. And in doing so, you placed yourself in a game with rules you don't understand and players who won't hesitate to use you against me. I never asked to be part of your world, I whispered. Few do. His smile held no humor now. Yet here you are regardless. After he left, I sank back against the pillows. Mind racing despite the medication dulling my senses. Outside my window lay a manicured garden surrounded by high stone walls. Beyond those walls was my life, modest and struggling, but mine. Somehow, I knew returning to it would be far from simple. Sleep claimed me eventually, dragging me into dreams where I ran through endless corridors, pursued by faceless men, while Dante watched from the shadows, waiting to catch me when I fell. I woke to darkness, momentarily. Disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, a small lamp glowed softly on the bedside table, illuminating a tray with covered dishes. The smell of food made my stomach growl, reminding me I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. As I reached for the tray, movement in the corner of the room startled me. Dante sat in a leather armchair, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. He looked up at my movement, removing the glasses in one smooth motion. You should eat, he said, nodding toward the tray. The doctor says you need to regain your strength. Have you been watching me sleep? I asked, unsure whether to be disturbed or comforted by his presence. Not continuously. He set his papers aside. I have a business to run. Right, your business. I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice as I uncovered a bowl of what appeared to be homemade soup, steam rising in fragrant tendrils. He observed me with that unnerving stillness. You disapprove of organized crime. Generally, yes. Yet you saved the life of a man you suspected was dangerous. I sipped the soup, rich chicken broth with delicate pasta, buying time to consider my response. I didn't think about it. I saw someone in danger and reacted. Exactly. He leaned forward. Pure instinct, no calculation. It's what makes you exceptional. The intensity in his voice made me uncomfortable. I focused on my soup, avoiding his eyes. I'm not exceptional. I'm a waitress with a mountain of debt and a bullet hole in my shoulder. Not anymore. My spoon clattered against the bowl. What does that mean? He stood, moving to the foot of my bed with that predatory grace that seemed to be his default. It means your life as you knew it is over, Isabella. Whether you intended it or not, you've been drawn into my world. I don't want to be in your world, I protested. Few choices remain once you've saved a man like me. His hands gripped the footboard, knuckles whitening slightly. There are protocols, expectations. You're now under my protection, which means you're also under my authority. I'm not yours to command, I said, heart racing at the implied threat beneath his words. Something darkened in his expression. Everything in my territory is mine to command. I'm not a thing, I whispered, fear and indignation battling within me. He moved suddenly, circling the bed until he loomed over me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. No, you're not a thing. You're infinitely more valuable and more dangerous. Without warning, he sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. His hand captured my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. Do you know what happens to people who save the lives of men in my position, Isabella? I shook my head slightly, constrained by his grip. They become liabilities, potential weaknesses that enemies can exploit. His thumb traced my lower lip. The touch so light it might have been imaginary. The smart move would be to eliminate that liability. Fear constricted my throat. Are you going to kill me? The question hung between us, heavy with possibility. Then Dante laughed, the sound warming the room despite its edge of danger. Kill you? No, little lioness. I'm going to keep you. His hand slid from my chin to cut my cheek. The gesture possessive yet oddly tender. Close to me, where I can ensure your safety. Where no one can use you against me. Where I can watch over what's mine. I'm not yours, I repeated, though the words sounded hollow even to my ears. His smile was that of a predator who knows its prey is already cornered. You became mine the moment you stepped between me and that bullet. The sooner you accept that reality, the easier your adjustment will be. And if I refuse to accept it, I challenged. Recklessness born of fear making me brave. His expression softened, thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Then we have a problem, Isabella. Because while I admire your spirit, I will not risk your safety or mine by allowing you to walk away. The gentle touch bell. I was trapped in a golden cage, held by a man whose tenderness was as terrifying as his cruelty might be. Get some rest, he murmured, rising from the bed. Tomorrow, when you're stronger, we'll discuss your new position. Position? I echoed. He paused at the door, silhouetted against the hallway light. Everyone in my household serves a purpose, Isabella. Even you. As the door closed behind him, I realized I had exchanged one form of servitude for another. From waitress to whatever Dante Romano decided I would become. The difference was that at Cafe Milano, I could quit. Something told me that walking away from Dante wouldn't be nearly so simple. Morning arrived with a gentle knock and the entrance of a slender woman in a crisp uniform carrying fresh towels and a garment bag. Good morning, Miss Isabella. I am Francesca, she said, her Italian accent more pronounced than Dante's. Romano asked me to help you prepare for the day. Prepare for what? I asked, struggling to sit up. Francesca smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Mr. Romano wishes to introduce you to the household staff this afternoon. He thought you might appreciate assistance with bathing given your injury. The thought of meeting staff while looking like a hospital patient made me grimace. I nodded gratefully, allowing Francesca to help me from the bed. My legs trembled, weak from disuse, and my shoulder throbbed despite the medication coursing through my system. The bathroom attached to my room was obscenely luxurious. All marble and gold fixtures with a walk-in shower that could have fit my entire apartment bathroom inside it. Francesca helped me undress, her professional demeanor never wavering, despite the ugly bruising that spread from my bandaged shoulder down my side, like watercolor on wet paper. How many people work here? I asked as she washed my hair, careful to keep soap from my wound. At the main house. 22, she replied. Plus security rotation main house. I echoed, trying to imagine a place large enough to require 22 staff members. Francesca hesitated before answering. Romano owns several properties. This is his primary residence in Chicago. After the bath, she helped me into unfamiliar clothes, silk pajamas, and a cashmere robe that slipped like water against my skin. The garments fit perfectly, raising uncomfortable questions about how Dante knew my size. These aren't mine, I said. Romano had them delivered yesterday. Francesca brushed my hair with gentle strokes. He's very attentive to details. The way she said it suggested this attentiveness wasn't always directed toward clothing. I swallowed my next question, unsure I wanted the answer. Francesca led me not back to bed, but to a chaise lounge positioned by the window, where sunlight illuminated a beautiful garden beyond. The grounds extended far beyond what I'd glimpsed yesterday, with manicured lawns giving way to what appeared to be a small orchard in the distance. Would you like breakfast now? Francesca asked, arranging pillows to support my injured side. My stomach growled in response. Yes, please. She returned minutes later with a tray of pastries, fresh fruit, and coffee that smelled divine. As I ate, I caught sight of movement in the garden below. Dante, dressed in athletic clothes, sparring with a younger man on a gravel terrace. Even from a distance, the controlled power in his movements was mesmerizing. He moved like someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to hurt people efficiently. He trains every morning, Francesca said, following my gaze. No matter where in the world he is, who is he fighting with? Luca, his nephew and head of security. As she paused, something like warning in her tone. Romano is very protective of his family. Before I could ask more, the sparring session ended. Dante clapped the younger man on the shoulder, then glanced up directly at my window. Even from this distance, I felt the weight of his gaze. He raised a hand in greeting, a gesture so normal it seemed out of place coming from him. Francesca cleared her throat. I'll return in an hour to help you dress for your meeting. Left alone, I sipped my coffee and tried to make sense of my situation. 3 days ago, I'd been a waitress worried about making rent. Now I was recuperating in a Mafia boss's mansion, wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary, about to be introduced to the household. The surreality of it all hit me in waves. I was still contemplating my bizarre circumstances when the bedroom door opened without a knock. Dante entered, freshly showered, his hair damp and curling slightly at the temples. He'd exchanged his workout clothes for dark slacks and a light blue button-down. The sleeves rolled to expose those same muscular forearms I'd noticed yesterday. You're looking better today, he said, assessing me with a sweep of his gaze that felt almost physical. How's the pain? Manageable, I replied, suddenly conscious of my casual attire. Thank you for the clothes. They suit you. He moved to the window, standing close enough that I caught the scent of his soap. Something citrusy and expensive. Did you sleep well? As can be expected. I sat down my coffee cup, needing something to do with my hands. Francesca mentioned you want me to meet the staff. He nodded, still looking out at the garden. They need to know your position in this household. There was that word again, position. And what exactly is my position? He turned to face me, expression unreadable. That depends on you. I don't understand. My enemies believe you're significant to me. He stated this like an irrefutable fact. After what happened at the restaurant, your connection to me has been noted. Whether you like it or not, you're now perceived as valuable or dangerous, depending on who's looking. I swallowed hard because I saved your life. Because you saved my life without knowing who I was. His eyes darkened. If you had known, your actions could be interpreted as serving your own interests. But you didn't know. You acted purely to protect another human being. At great risk to yourself, he moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. Such selflessness is rare in my world. It makes you both precious and a target. I don't want to be either, I whispered. What you want ceased to matter the moment that bullet entered your shoulder. His voice remained gentle despite the harshness of his words. Now we must deal with what is. And what is that exactly? I asked, unable to keep frustration from my voice. You have 3 options. He counted them off on his fingers. 1. You join my household in an official capacity. Perhaps as my personal assistant, you would have protection, comfort, and my resources at your disposal. What would I have to do as your assistant? I couldn't keep suspicion from my tone. Nothing inappropriate, Isabella. I don't force women into my bed. Heat flooded my cheeks. I didn't mean you did. He interrupted. And it's a fair concern, but I'm a businessman, not a monster. My assistant manages my schedule, handles correspondence, accompanies me to certain functions. It's a position of trust. And the second option? I asked, eager to change the subject. You leave. His expression hardened. With a new identity, in a new city, under my distant protection. You'd never return to Chicago or contact your family again. My heart stuttered. That's not an option. My sister needs me. My mother would be provided for. He finished. But you'd never see them again. It's the only way to ensure their safety as well as yours. Panic clawed at my throat. You said there were 3 options. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. The third option isn't really an option at all. If you refuse the first 2, if you attempt to return to your old life without precautions, my enemies will find you. They will use you to get to me, and they will not be kind. The clinical way he described my potential torture or death sent ice through my veins, so I either work for you or disappear forever. Put simply, yes, he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising tenderness. Though I hope you'll see it as more than mere employment. I protect what's mine, Isabella. My family, my people, those under my care want for nothing. Except freedom, I said quietly. His hand lingered near my face. Freedom is an illusion. We're all bound by something. Poverty, obligation, fear. I'm merely offering golden chains instead of iron ones. Before I could respond, another knock sounded at the door. Dante stepped back, calling permission to enter. Francesca appeared, arms laden with clothing. Everything is ready downstairs, Mr. Thank you, Francesca. He turned back to me. I'll leave you to dress. Join me in the study when you're ready. Francesca will show you the way. After he left, Francesca laid out the clothes on my bed. A simple but elegant navy blue dress, soft leather flats, and delicate underwear that still had price tags attached, all in my exact size. He had these delivered from Neiman Marcus yesterday, she explained, helping me out of the robe. Romano said you would prefer something comfortable but appropriate. The fact that he'd thought about what I might prefer was oddly touching despite the circumstances. Francesca helped me dress, careful of my injured shoulder, then guided me through a maze of hallways that confirmed the enormous scale of the house. We passed artwork that belonged in museums, antique furniture that whispered of old money, and security cameras disguised as architectural elements. The two guards we encountered nodded respectfully as we passed, their eyes cataloging me with professional assessment. Francesca stopped before a heavy wooden door, knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. Miss Isabella, sir. The study was a testament to masculine luxury, leather furniture, dark wood paneling, and walls lined with books that appeared well-read rather than decorative. Dante stood at a large desk, conversing quietly with three men who turned to stare as I entered. Thank you, Francesca, Dante said, dismissing her with a nod before approaching me. Isabella, I'd like you to meet some of my associates. The introductions passed in a blur. Luca, the nephew I'd seen sparring earlier, Giovanni, an older man whose silver hair and expensive suit exuded authority, and Michael, whose American accent stood out among the Italian voices. All three men examined me with barely concealed curiosity. Gentlemen, Dante said once the formalities concluded, Isabella will be joining my household as my personal assistant. She is to be afforded every courtesy and protection. Is that understood? The men murmured agreement, though I caught the significant look that passed between Giovanni and Michael. Sir, Giovanni ventured. Perhaps we should discuss the Torino matter before later. Dante cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. For now, I'd like a moment alone with Isabella. The men filed out, Luca pausing to squeeze Dante's shoulder in what seemed a gesture of support or warning. When the door closed behind them, Dante gestured toward a leather sofa. Please sit. You shouldn't be on your feet too long. I sank into the soft leather, overwhelmed by the morning's events. I don't recall agreeing to be your assistant. He poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter, handing me one before sitting opposite me. Would you prefer I introduced you as my hostage? Despite everything, a startled laugh escaped me. Is that humor, Mr. Dante? He corrected, a smile softening his features. And yes, contrary to popular belief, men in my position occasionally appreciate irony. I sipped my water, buying time. You announced my position without consulting me. A necessary formality. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. My organization operates on clear hierarchies. Ambiguity creates vulnerability. By establishing your role, I've placed you under my direct protection, which means anyone who harms you answers to me personally. The implication hung between us, and if I still want to leave, then say so, and arrangements will be made. His expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes tightened, though I hope you'll give this arrangement a chance. I asked, genuinely curious. You could have any assistant you wanted. Why keep a waitress with no qualifications who knows nothing about your world? He studied me for a long moment, as though deciding how much to reveal. Several reasons. First, practicality. You've already seen too much. Second, appearances. My reputation would suffer if I failed to reward someone who saved my life. And third, he paused, something shifting in his expression. You intrigue me, Isabella. Your selflessness, your courage, these are rare qualities. His candor surprised me. That's it. I'm an interesting specimen to study. He set down his glass with deliberate care. You're also a beautiful woman who looked at me without fear or calculation, at least initially. Do you know how rarely that happens in my position? Heat crept up my neck at his directness. I'm afraid of you now. Are you? He raised an eyebrow. Or are you afraid of your circumstances? The distinction felt important somehow. Before I could formulate a response, a discreet knock interrupted us. Come, Dante called. Luca entered, his expression grim. Sorry to interrupt, uncle. There's a situation that requires immediate attention. Dante stood immediately. What kind of situation? Torino's men were spotted near Isabella's apartment building. They've been asking questions about her. Luca's eyes flicked to me briefly. They know she survived. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Dante's posture shifted subtly. The businessman replaced by something more dangerous. How many? For that we identified. Probably more watching. Put Matteo's team on surveillance. I want to know everyone who goes in or out of that building. Dante's voice remained calm, but his hands had clenched into fists. And double security here. No one enters the grounds without my explicit approval. Luca nodded, retreating from the study without another word. Dante remained motionless for several seconds, staring at the closed door with an expression that sent chills down my spine. Who's Torino? I asked, breaking the heavy silence. He turned slowly, his face a careful mask once more. Someone who wants what I have, and that includes me now. The thought made my stomach turn. That includes you. He crossed to a cabinet, withdrawing a leather folder. Which brings us back to your decision. I need your answer, Isabella. Now, the choice wasn't really a choice at all. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words he wanted to hear. I need to talk to my sister first to explain why I've disappeared. Something softened in his expression. Of course, family is important. Can I see her? I asked, hope flaring briefly. Not yet. He held up a hand to forestall my protest. It's too dangerous while Torino's men are watching. But you can call her from a secure line with certain precautions. It was less than I wanted, but more than I expected. He nodded, opening the folder to reveal what appeared to be a contract. Then you agreed to stay, at least temporarily. The document before me was written in legal language too complex to quickly understand, but the title was clear. Private Employment Agreement. What exactly does this commit me to? I asked, scanning the dense paragraphs. Standard terms of employment, confidentiality, loyalty, duties as my assistant. He pointed to several highlighted sections. Generous compensation, healthcare, security provisions, nothing inappropriate or illegal required of you. And if I want to leave eventually, there's a termination clause. His finger traced down to the final page. 3 months' notice, relocation assistance, lifetime security consultation, all quite civilized. I looked up from the contract to find him watching me intently, his eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. Why are you being so reasonable about this? You could just force me to stay. I could, he acknowledged. But willing loyalty is far more valuable than coerced submission. I want you to choose this, Isabella. The pen he offered felt heavier than it should. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it, my mind racing through limited options. Stay and become entangled in a world of violence and power, or flee and abandon everything and everyone I loved. If I sign this, I said slowly, I want regular contact with my family and protection for them, too. He didn't hesitate. Anything else? I took a deep breath. I want your word that you won't ask me to do anything that violates my conscience. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. You have it. I never intended to corrupt you, Isabella. Your moral compass is precisely what makes you valuable. With a sense of sealing my fate, I signed the contract. Dante took the pen from my fingers, his hand lingering against mine for a moment too long to be accidental. Welcome to the family, Isabella. The way he said it sounded more like a claim than a greeting. As he signed beside my name, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just traded one prison for another. Only this one had gilded bars and a jailer whose intentions remained dangerously unclear. 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo of recovery and adjustment. My shoulder healed gradually, pain fading to a dull ache that flared only with sudden movements. Francesca helped me exercise the damaged muscles each morning, following the regimen prescribed by Dante's private doctor, who visited every 3rd day. My new role as personal assistant remained largely theoretical while I recovered. Though Dante began including me in certain aspects of his legitimate business, I learned that beneath the criminal enterprise lay a vast network of legal companies, real estate holdings, import-export businesses, technology investments, and hospitality ventures that span several continents. Most of what I do is perfectly legal, he explained one afternoon as we reviewed property acquisitions in his study. The other activities simply expedite processes that bureaucracy tends to complicate. I had carefully avoided asking direct questions about those other activities, maintaining a deliberate ignorance that Dante seemed to respect. He never discussed violence in my presence, though I occasionally caught fragments of conversations that fell silent when I entered rooms. My promised phone call to my sister happened my third day in the mansion under Dante's watchful eye. I fabricated a story about a job opportunity with a private client, technically true, if misleading, and promised to visit soon. The relief in Emma's voice had brought tears to my eyes, especially when she mentioned that someone had anonymously paid off our mother's medical bills. "It's like a miracle, Bella," she'd said, excitement bubbling through the phone line. "Mom can finally get that surgery she's been putting off. The hospital said everything's covered. Past and future treatments." I'd glanced at Dante, who pretended absorption in his laptop screen while obviously listening to every word. The knowledge that he could grant such life-changing assistance with a single command was both comforting and terrifying. That evening marked my first dinner with Dante outside my room. He'd insisted I join him in the formal dining room, though he dismissed the staff after they served our meal. "You've been cooped up too long," he said, pouring wine into crystal glasses that caught the candlelight. "Besides, we should celebrate your recovery." "I'm hardly recovered," I replied, gesturing to the sling still supporting my arm. "But improving." His eyes softened in the dim light. "You're stronger than you know, Isabella." Throughout dinner, I found myself increasingly conscious of his gaze, the way it lingered when I spoke, how it traced the movement of my hand as I raised my wine glass. I'd noticed his attractiveness from the first moment in the restaurant, but proximity had only intensified its effect. The dangerous edge that surrounded him like an aura should have repelled me. Instead, I found myself drawn to the contradictions he embodied. Ruthless in business, yet surprisingly gentle with me, commanding with his subordinates, yet attentive to my comfort. "Tell me about your family," he said, as we finished our meal, settling back with a glass of amber liquor. "You rarely speak of them." The request seemed innocuous, but instinct told me to be cautious. "There's not much to tell. My sister is 19, studying nursing. My mother has lupus, which has gotten worse over the years. My father left when I was 12, and you became the provider." It wasn't a question. I nodded, uncomfortable with his perception. "Someone had to pay the bills. You sacrificed your own opportunities." Again, not a question. I did what was necessary. I studied his expression, trying to understand his interest. "Why do you want to know this?" He swirled his drink thoughtfully. "I'm trying to understand you. The woman who would step in front of a bullet for a stranger. I told you it was instinct. Born from years of protecting others." He leaned forward, eyes intent. "You've spent your life shielding people, haven't you? Your mother from financial ruin, your sister from missed opportunities, even your customers at the restaurant. I watched you for weeks before that night. The way you diffused situations, managed difficult patrons, protected the younger staff. My pulse quickened. You were watching me before the shooting." A faint smile touched his lips. "Cafe Milano has excellent risotto. I have a standing reservation every Tuesday." "I never noticed you before that night," I said, then winced at how that sounded. "You weren't meant to." His smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek I hadn't noticed before. "Though I noticed you immediately, the waitress who treated everyone with equal respect, regardless of their tab, who slipped extra bread to the old man, who ordered only soup, who absorbed Sharon's pettiness without complaint." Discomfort crept along my spine. "How often were you there?" "Often enough to know your extraordinary and ordinary circumstances." He set down his glass with careful precision. "Which makes me wonder how extraordinary you might be in extraordinary circumstances." Before I could respond to this unsettling observation, the dining room door opened. Luca entered, his expression tense. "Sorry to interrupt, Uncle." His eyes flickered briefly to me. "There's a situation that requires your attention." Dante's demeanor shifted instantly, warmth replaced by cool authority. "Excuse me, Isabella. Enjoy your dessert. I may be a while." After they left, I abandoned any pretense of eating, retreating to my room where I paced the plush carpet, my thoughts racing. Dante had been watching me long before the shooting. Had the drunk men been part of some elaborate test? No, his rage that night had been too genuine, his concern during my recovery too consistent. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind replaying every interaction with Dante, searching for hidden motives. Dawn found me exhausted but resolved. I needed more information about the man who now controlled my life. Over the following days, I began paying closer attention to the household rhythms. I noted which staff members seemed most approachable, which areas of the mansion saw the heaviest security, which times Dante was most likely to be occupied with business. Francesca proved a valuable, if reluctant, source of information. While helping me dress one morning, she mentioned that she'd worked for the Romano family for 15 years. You must know Dante well, I ventured, keeping my tone casual. Her hands paused briefly at my shoulder. Romano is a private man. But fair, I pressed. As an employer, I mean, she resumed her task, securing the sling with practiced movements. More than fair, when my husband became ill 3 years ago, Mr. Romano arranged specialists from Europe, paid for experimental treatments not covered by insurance. Gabriella is alive because of him. The genuine gratitude in her voice wasn't what I expected. He takes care of his people. Loyalty flows both ways in this house, she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. Remember that, Miss Isabella. The warning or advice lingered as I made my way to Dante's study for what had become our morning routine. He would review overnight reports while I organized his correspondence and schedule, learning the complex web of his business interests. I found him standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. He acknowledged my entrance with a slight nod, but continued his conversation in rapid Italian. Though I couldn't understand the words, the cold anger in his tone required no translation. When he finally ended the call, he remained silent for several moments, staring out at the garden. Is everything all right? I asked, setting my tablet on his desk. Torino's men made another attempt to access your apartment yesterday. His voice was eerily calm. They were dissuaded by my security team. A chill ran through me. He turned, his expression carefully neutral. It means the situation is escalating. Torino senses weakness. Because of me. The realization settled like lead in my stomach. Not because of you, he corrected sharply. Because of what you represent. Which is what exactly? He approached slowly, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head to maintain eye contact. A change in pattern. For years, I've maintained certain boundaries. No attachments outside the family. No vulnerabilities that could be exploited. I'm not an attachment, I protested. I'm your employee. We both know you're more than that, Isabella. My heart stuttered at his directness. I don't understand what you want from me. Neither do I. The admission seemed to cost him something, which is precisely the problem. Before I could respond, Luca appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. They found Matteo. Dante's entire demeanor transformed, a cold mask sliding into place. Abandoned warehouse near the river. He's alive, but barely. They're bringing him in now. Prepare the medical wing. Dante grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and called Alessandro. Tell him to bring everything. This wasn't a random attack. As he moved toward the door, he paused beside me. Stay in your room until I come for you. Lock the door. Open it only for Francesca or myself. What's happening? I asked, fear closing my throat. His hand brushed my cheek briefly. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. Just stay safe. After he left, I returned to my room as instructed, but anxiety made confinement unbearable. Hours passed with no word. Twice I heard hurried footsteps in the corridor, urgent voices speaking in Italian. When Francesca brought lunch, her usual warmth was replaced with distracted efficiency. Is Matteo all right? I asked as she turned to leave. She paused, conflict evident in her expression. The doctors are with him. Why would someone hurt him? Francesca glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. He was watching your apartment building. One of Mr. Romano's most trusted security men. The implication hit like a physical blow. Someone hurt him because of me. Not because of you. She echoed Dante's earlier words. Because of his loyalty to Mr. after she left, guilt and fear warred within me. A man was fighting for his life because he'd been protecting me, or rather protecting Dante's interest in me. The artificial bubble I'd been living in for 2 weeks suddenly felt dangerously thin. Night fell with still no word from Dante. I dozed fitfully in a chair by the window, startling awake at every distant sound. Near midnight, My door opened without a knock. Dante stood in the threshold, his appearance shocking after the polished businessman I'd grown accustomed to. His shirt was wrinkled, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms smudged with what looked disturbingly like dried blood. His jaw darkened with stubble, and his eyes held a coldness that made me shrink back involuntarily. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Is Matteo alive?" I asked, rising from the chair. Something shifted in his expression. "Yes, he'll recover eventually." Relief flooded me, followed immediately by fresh fear at the implications of eventually. What happened to him? Dante closed the door, moving to pour himself a drink from the crystal decanter kept on my sideboard. "Nothing you need to know about." "I think I do need to know," I insisted. Courage born of fatigue and frustration. "If people are being tortured because of me, he interrupted sharply. "Make no mistake, Isabella. Matteo was targeted because he works for me. You are simply the excuse Torino needed to escalate a conflict that's been brewing for years." "Then let me go?" The words escaped before I could consider their wisdom. "If I'm making things worse," in 2 quick strides, he closed the distance between us, his hands grasping my upper arms with carefully restrained strength. "Let you go now when Torino has proven he'll target anyone connected to me." His laugh held no humor. "He would have you within hours, and he would use you in ways that would make Matteo's injuries look merciful." Fear closed my throat, not of Dante, but of the faceless Torino and what he represented. "What does he want?" Dante's grip gentled, one hand moving to brush hair from my face with incongruous tenderness. "What all men like him want: power, territory, respect." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "Me broken or dead." The intimacy of the gesture contrasted sharply with his words, leaving me disoriented. "And what do you want?" Something shifted in his gaze, hardness giving way to an emotion I couldn't identify. "Right now, to keep you safe. To end Torino before he hurts anyone else under my protection." His hand slid to cut my neck, warm and possessive, and to understand why. After years of perfect control, I find myself making decisions based on a waitress who looked at me without fear. The raw honesty in his voice stripped away my defenses. "I'm afraid now." His eyes searched mine. "You're cautious, concerned, but not afraid." "Not of me. That's the problem, Isabella. You should be." Morning light filtered through the curtains when I woke, momentarily disoriented. Memories of the previous night's conversation with Dante flooded back. His blood-stained appearance, the intensity in his eyes when he'd told me I should fear him. Yet, he'd left shortly after, instructing me to rest, his touch lingering on my face like a promise or a warning. The mansion hummed with unusual activity when I ventured out. Security personnel I hadn't seen before patrolled the hallways, speaking in hushed tones into discreet earpieces. In the kitchen, staff worked with nervous efficiency, barely acknowledging my presence as I helped myself to coffee. "Romano requests your presence in his office," said a voice behind me, startling me into nearly spilling my drink. I turned to find Luca watching me with that same assessing gaze he always used somewhere between suspicion and curiosity. Unlike his uncle, Luca made no effort to disguise his dangerous nature. The gun holstered beneath his tailored jacket was clearly visible as he gestured for me to follow him. "Is everything all right?" I asked as we walked the long corridor toward Dante's wing of the house. Luca's sideways glance revealed nothing. "My uncle will explain." Dante's office differed from his study. Less comfortable, more functional. Maps covered one wall, computer screens another. When we entered, he was standing at a large table with several men I recognized from previous introductions, all bent over what appeared to be blueprints. He looked up, and I was struck by the transformation from last night. Gone was the disheveled, blood-stained man with haunted eyes. This Dante wore an impeccably tailored suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression controlled and commanding. Only the faint shadows beneath his eyes hinted at a sleepless night. "Isabella," he acknowledged, straightening. "Thank you for coming." The other men stepped back, exchanging glances I couldn't interpret. One by one, they filed out at Dante's slight nod until only Luca remained. "What's happening?" I asked, unable to contain my unease any longer. Dante's expression softened fractionally. "Circumstances have changed. We need to move you to a more secure location temporarily." "Move me." Panic fluttered in my chest. "Where for how long?" My estate in Lake Co., he replied, his tone suggesting this should reassure me. It's remote, heavily secured, and unknown to most outside my immediate circle. It whispered, the reality of my situation crashing down like a physical weight. I can't go to Italy. My family will be protected, he cut in smoothly. I've already arranged for your mother and sister to be relocated to a private medical facility in Arizona. They believe it's part of an expanded healthcare program through your mother's insurance. The casual way he spoke of manipulating my family's lives sent anger surging through me. You had no right to make these decisions without consulting me. I had every right, he countered, voice hardening. Your contract gives me full authority over security measures affecting you and your family. And after what happened to Matteo, timing became critical. Luca shifted uncomfortably, drawing my attention. What aren't you telling me? Dante and his nephew exchanged a look laden with unspoken communication. After a moment, Dante nodded. Torino's men left a message with Matteo. Luca explained, his voice clinical. Photos of your sister on campus. Your mother outside her doctor's office. They know exactly who matters to you. The room tilted sickeningly. They're going to hurt my family to get to me. Dante corrected, moving around the table to stand before me. You are my perceived weakness. By threatening you and those you love, Torino believes he can control me. Can he? The question escaped before I could reconsider. Something dangerous flashed in Dante's eyes. He certainly thinks so. The implication hung between us. Heavy with meaning I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. Luca cleared his throat. The jet is ready whenever you are, Uncle. Security is in position at both locations. Dante nodded. Give us a moment. After Luca left, silence stretched between us. I hugged my arms across my chest, suddenly cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. How long will we be gone? I finally asked, resignation coloring my voice. Until it's safe to return, he replied, which wasn't an answer at all. And when will that be? His expression hardened when Torino is no longer a threat. The clinical way he referenced eliminating another human being should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself wondering what it said about my own morality that I felt only relief at the implied violence. I need to pack, I said, avoiding the ethical quagmire our conversation threatened to become. Francesca has prepared everything you'll need. He stepped closer, his voice softening. I understand this is difficult, Isabella. But I promise you, your family will be safe. You will be safe. But you won't be, I said, the realization dawning as I studied his face. You're sending me away while you deal with Torino. I'm sending you away because your presence clouds my judgment, and I need perfect clarity for what comes next. Before I could respond, he reached for my hand, his touch surprisingly gentle as he placed a small object in my palm. I looked down to find a delicate gold ring with a small ruby set in an antique filigree setting. What is this? I asked, confused by the seemingly random gift. Protection, he replied. Everyone in my inner circle wears a symbol of their connection to me. It identifies you as untouchable to those who understand the significance. I stared at the ring, understanding dawning. This marks me as your possession. As under my protection, he corrected, though his eyes told a different story. Were it always, especially in Italy. The weight of the ring felt disproportionate to its physical size as I slipped it onto my right hand. It fit perfectly, of course. Dante left nothing to chance. The car is waiting, he said, stepping back. Luca will accompany you to the airfield. You're not coming. I hadn't expected the sharp disappointment that accompanied the question. I'll join you in a few days, he replied, his expression carefully neutral. Business requires my presence here a little longer. The business of eliminating Torino. I understood without him saying it explicitly. I nodded, suddenly unsure what to say and what could be our final moments if things went wrong. Dante solved the dilemma by closing the distance between us, his hand rising to cup my face with that now familiar possessive gentleness. Be safe, Isabella. Trust no one but Luca and the staff you recognize from here. Before I could respond, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to my forehead. A benediction and a claiming all at once. The gesture left me breathless, confused by the conflicting emotions it triggered. I'll see you in Como, he murmured against my skin, then stepped back, his professional mask sliding seamlessly back into place. Luca appeared at the door as if summoned telepathically. And just like that, I was whisked away from Chicago, from my family, from everything familiar. into a world where I existed solely as an extension of Dante Romano's will. The journey passed in a blur of private terminals, luxury transportation, and differential staff who never quite met my eyes. Luca remained a constant silent shadow, his vigilance never wavering, even on the private jet where we were alone, except for the crew. It was only as we approached the Italian estate, a spectacular villa perched above Lake Cao's crystalline waters, that Luca finally spoke more than essential directions. "He's never brought anyone here," he said, watching my reaction as the car wound up the Cypress Line drive. "Not in the 5 years since he acquired it." I turned from the window to study his face. "Why are you telling me this?" Luca's expression remained carefully neutral. "Because you should understand the position you occupy in his life, for better or worse." "Which do you think it is?" I asked, genuinely curious about his assessment. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, so reminiscent of his uncle that it startled me. "That depends entirely on what happens next." The villa proved even more spectacular inside than out. A seamless blend of historic architecture and modern luxury. A small staff greeted us, all speaking English for my benefit, all wearing small indicators of their allegiance to Dante. Pins, rings, or pendants similar to but distinct from mine. Francesca appeared from within, her familiar face a welcome sight amidst so much strangeness. "Miss Isabella, welcome. I'll show you to your rooms." The suite prepared for me overlooked the lake with a private terrace and sumptuous furnishings that somehow perfectly matched my taste, despite never having discussed such preferences. My clothes, a mix of familiar items from my apartment and new pieces in the same style, had been unpacked and arranged in a walk-in closet larger than my entire bedroom in Chicago. "There's a phone on the nightstand," Francesca explained as she showed me around. "It connects only to the house and to Mr. Romano's secure line. For your safety, please don't try to use any other communication devices while you're here." The gentle reminder of my gilded cage didn't escape me. "How long has Dante owned this place?" 5 years, she replied, confirming Luca's earlier comment. "He comes here when he needs solitude. Very few people know of its existence. Yet he sent me here." I mused, more to myself than to her. Francesca's expression softened with something like sympathy. "Mr. Romano protects what he values, Miss Isabella, sometimes at great personal cost." The days passed in strange isolation. The estate grounds were extensive but thoroughly secured, allowing me limited freedom to explore gardens and shoreline paths under the watchful eyes of security personnel who materialized whenever I ventured outdoors. Books, films, and art supplies appeared in my rooms. Thoughtful distractions I recognized as Dante's doing. Each evening, the phone would ring precisely at 8 o'clock. Dante's voice thousands of miles away would inquire about my day, my comfort, my needs, everything except what I truly wanted to know. When would this exile end? On the 4th night, the pattern changed. No call came at 8. By 10, anxiety had me pacing the terrace, imagination conjuring increasingly terrible scenarios involving Torino and Dante's fate. Just after midnight, as I finally prepared for bed with resignation, a commotion outside drew me to the window. Headlights swept the driveway as several vehicles approached. Security personnel materialized from the darkness. Positions alert but not alarmed, suggesting expected arrivals rather than threats. I slipped on a robe over my nightgown and ventured into the hallway, drawn by voices speaking rapid Italian downstairs. Francesca appeared from her quarters, hair disheveled from sleep. "Return to your room, Miss Isabella," she urged, her expression tense. "Please, is it Dante?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Before she could respond, the front door opened below, and I leaned over the balustrade to see Dante himself enter, flanked by Luca and 2 security men I recognized from Chicago. Even from above, I could see the weariness in his posture, the careful way he held himself suggesting injury or pain. He looked up as though sensing my presence, our eyes meeting across the distance. Something in his expression shifted, hardness giving way to something softer, more vulnerable. Without a word to his companions, he moved toward the stairs. Francesca discreetly disappeared as Dante reached the landing, leaving us alone in the dimly lit hallway. Up close, the evidence of what he'd been doing was unmistakable. A healing cut across his cheekbone, bruising at his temple, knuckles raw and scabbed. He'd changed from his usual impeccable suits to dark clothing that concealed whatever other injuries he might carry. "You should be sleeping," he said, echoing his words from nights ago in Chicago. "Is it over?" I asked, ignoring his gentle rebuke. Yes, that single syllable contained multitudes. Finality, victory, cost. I didn't ask for details, uncertain whether my reluctance stemmed from moral qualms or self-preservation. "Were you hurt?" I reached toward the cut on his face, stopping just short of touching him. "Nothing serious." He captured my hand, his thumb brushing over the ruby ring he'd given me. "You're still wearing it. You told me to." I reminded him. "And do you always do as you're told, Isabella?" "Rarely," I admitted. "But this seemed important to you." "It was." His voice softened as he tugged gently on my hand, drawing me closer. "It means more than you know to see it on your finger." We stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. So much had changed in the weeks since that night at Cafe Milano. I had changed. My understanding of the world and my place in it transformed by proximity to this dangerous, complicated man. "What happens now?" I finally asked, the question encompassing far more than our immediate future. Dante's free hand rose to cut my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone in that now familiar gesture. "Now we have choices, Isabella. Real ones, not forced by circumstance or threat." "What choices?" I whispered, pulse quickening under his touch. "You can return to Chicago to a life not unlike your old one, but with my protection, ensuring your comfort and safety from a distance." His eyes held mine, searching. "Or you can stay with me, not as my employee or my ward, but as something more." The offer hung between us, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. "And if I choose to go back, then I'll respect your decision." The words clearly cost him, belied by the tightening of his fingers against mine. "Though I would hope you might permit me to visit occasionally." "And if I stay?" I asked, already knowing my decision, but needing to understand what it meant. Instead of answering with words, he closed the remaining distance between us. His lips found mine with gentle pressure that quickly gave way to something more demanding. As my response encouraged him, the kiss deepened, his arms drawing me against him with careful attention to his injuries, yet unmistakable possession. When we finally parted, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to mine. "If you stay, you accept all of me, Isabella, the businessman and the monster. I won't pretend to be something I'm not." "I don't want pretense," I whispered, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I want truth between us, even when it's difficult." His smile transformed his face, years falling away as relief, and something dangerously close to joy replaced the guarded control I'd grown accustomed to. "Then stay. Choose me, knowing exactly who and what I am." In that moment, standing in the hushed hallway of a villa overlooking moonlit waters, I made my choice, not from fear or obligation, but from the recognition of something rare and precious forming between us, a connection forged in violence and danger, yet evolving into something that might, with care and honesty, become love. "I choose you," I said simply. "All of you." His arms tightened around me, the embrace of a man who had faced death and returned victorious to claim what he considered his. As his lips found mine once more, I understood that in saving Dante Romano that night in the restaurant, I had not lost my freedom. I had found a different kind, one where protection and possession, danger and devotion, existed in perfect, complicated balance. The bullet that had brought us together had changed everything, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. Not as victim and savior, nor captor and captive, but as equals joined by choice and circumstance. A waitress and a mafia boss finding in each other the missing pieces neither knew they sought until fate intervened with gunpowder and devotion. The weeks that followed our confession by the moonlit lake passed in a dreamlike haze of discovery. Dante proved a patient teacher as I learned to navigate his world, introducing me to the subtle hierarchies and unspoken rules that governed the Romano Empire. Morning coffee became strategy sessions where he explained the legitimate businesses that formed the foundation of his operations, his fingers tracing shipping routes across maps, while I memorized names and connections that would keep me alive in this new existence. "You're a natural at this," he observed one morning as I successfully identified potential security risks in a proposed hotel acquisition in Miami. Your instinct for reading people translates well to business. His praise warmed me more than the Italian sunshine streaming through the villa's windows. I found myself hungry for his approval, eager to prove I belonged at his side not just as a protected asset, but as a true partner. The adjustment wasn't without challenges. Learning to live under constant security meant accepting that spontaneous moments belonged to my past. Every meal was prepared by trusted staff, every excursion planned with military precision. Rico and two other guards became permanent shadows, their presence both reassuring and suffocating. When I mentioned missing the simple pleasure of walking alone to the corner market, Dante's expression darkened with genuine concern. That freedom cost you a bullet, amore. His endearment, spoken with such tenderness, made my heart skip. I won't risk your safety for nostalgia. The finality in his voice brooked no argument. Yet I detected the underlying fear that drove his protectiveness. This powerful man who commanded absolute loyalty from hundreds of people lived in constant awareness that his enemies would use any weakness against him. I had become his greatest vulnerability and his most precious treasure. Our physical relationship deepened with surprising gentleness. Despite his reputation for ruthlessness, Dante approached our intimacy with reverent patience, as though I were something sacred he feared to damage. His hands, capable of such violence, mapped my skin with worshipful delicacy. When he finally made me completely his, it was with whispered promises in Italian against my throat, words that sounded like prayers and possessions intertwined. Ti amo, Isabella mia, he breathed against my collarbone as we lay tangled in silk sheets, Lake Como glittering beyond the open windows. You are my heart, my life, everything I never knew I was searching for. The vulnerability in his confession made my chest ache with emotions too complex to untangle. Love, yes, but also the fierce protectiveness he'd awakened in me. This dangerous man needed protecting too, from enemies who would destroy anything beautiful they couldn't possess. But our idyllic sanctuary couldn't remain isolated from the realities of Dante's position forever. 3 months into our Lake Como retreat, Luca arrived with news that shattered our peaceful existence. His face was grave as he entered Dante's study, where we'd been reviewing quarterly reports from the legitimate businesses. Uncle, we have a problem. Torino's cousin, Salvatore Torino, has arrived from Sicily. He's claiming blood vendetta and demanding tribute from our associates in Little Italy. Word is he's brought soldiers with him, old country connections that don't follow our rules. Dante's transformation was instantaneous. The loving partner I'd been sharing lazy mornings with disappeared, replaced by the cold strategist who'd built an empire. His amber eyes turned to flint as he processed the implications. How many men? When did they arrive? And what response have our people given? 12 that we've identified, Luca replied. They've been in the city for a week, testing boundaries. Tony's nephew was approached outside his restaurant, told to pass along a message that the Torino name demands satisfaction. Some of our younger soldiers are getting restless, wanting to respond with force. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only outward sign of his fury. And the older heads, what do they counsel? Luca's expression grew troubled. Giovanni suggests negotiation, a sit-down to discuss terms. Michael thinks we should make an example immediately, show that Chicago isn't open to outsiders. The family is divided, Uncle. They're looking to you for direction. As the men discussed strategy, I found myself studying the dynamics with new understanding. This wasn't just business, but survival, a complex dance of honor and violence that governed every interaction. My presence here, my very existence as Dante's chosen partner, would be seen as either strength or weakness depending on how he handled this challenge. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like a mantle I hadn't chosen but couldn't refuse. They know about Isabella, don't they? Dante's question cut through the strategic discussion with deadly quiet. That's why Salvatore is moving now, testing whether my feelings for her have made me soft. Luca's silence confirmed what we all understood. I wasn't just Dante's lover anymore. I was a weapon his enemies could use against him, a pressure point that could force him into disadvantageous positions. The next morning, Dante informed me we were returning to Chicago. His decision wasn't up for discussion, but his reasons became clear as he outlined the security measures that would govern our return. I would remain at the mansion while he dealt with the Torino situation, protected but essentially imprisoned until the threat was neutralized. I won't be caged while you face this alone, I told him as we boarded his private jet. The words came out stronger than I felt, but his slight smile suggested he'd expected no less. You said we were equals, partners. That has to mean something beyond pretty dresses and protected isolation. His hand found mine as the jet lifted off, fingers intertwining with a possessiveness that had become familiar comfort. It means everything, cara mia, which is why I need you safe. My enemies would use you to destroy me, and I would let them rather than see you harmed. Can you understand that? The raw honesty in his confession made my heart clench. This proud, powerful man would sacrifice everything he'd built to keep me safe, and that knowledge was both humbling and terrifying. Chicago greeted us with autumn's first bitter wind and an atmosphere thick with tension. The mansion's staff moved with military efficiency, though I noticed new faces among the security personnel and subtle changes in routine that spoke of heightened alertness. Francesca helped me settle back into my rooms, her usual warmth tempered by worry that she tried unsuccessfully to hide. The first few days passed uneventfully, though I chafed at the restrictions that kept me confined to the mansion grounds. Dante left early each morning for meetings I wasn't privileged to attend, returning after dark with exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. Our conversations grew brief and careful, both of us aware that the sanctuary we'd found in Italy had been left behind with the lake's peaceful waters. Everything changed on a Thursday evening when Dante failed to return by his usual time. 8 o'clock passed, then 9, with no word from his security team. Francesca tried to maintain normalcy, serving dinner as though nothing was amiss, but I could see the tension in her movements, the way she glanced toward the door whenever a car passed on the street outside. By 10:30, I'd abandoned any pretense of calm. Despite specific instructions to remain in my rooms if anything seemed wrong, I made my way to Dante's study where I hoped to find some clue about his whereabouts. The room felt hollow without his commanding presence, leather furniture and expensive artwork rendered meaningless by his absence. I was searching his desk for anything that might explain the delay when Luca burst through the door, his face pale with controlled panic. Isabella, thank God. We need to move you now. Uncle's been taken. The world tilted sickeningly around me as I processed his words. Taken, as in kidnapped. My mouth went dry as implications crashed through my consciousness like physical blows. Where? Who? When can we get him back? The questions tumbled out in a rush, while Luca gestured urgently toward the door. Salvatore grabbed him during a meet that was supposed to be neutral ground. We have people tracking them, but right now our priority is keeping you safe. They'll use him to get to you, or use you to get to him. Either way, we can't let them have both pieces. Something cold and hard crystallized in my chest as I looked at this man who'd become like a brother to me. You're going to hide me away while Dante suffers because of me. That's not protection, it's cowardice. Luca's expression darkened, but I continued before he could argue. I know these people better than you think. I grew up around men who used fear to control women. Dante is suffering right now because they think he'll break for me. Then let's not prove them right, Luca said grimly. What are you suggesting, Isabella? Because if you're thinking of trading yourself for him, that's exactly what they want. A grieving widow is useless to them, but a living man who's lost everything he cares about, that's a weapon they can use for years. The brutal logic of his words settled over me like ice water, but it also clarified my thinking. If hiding was useless and trading was foolish, that left only one option, one that would require me to be far braver than I'd ever imagined possible. Then we don't trade and we don't hide. We take him back and make sure the Torino family understands that threatening a Romano brings consequences they can't afford. Lucas stared at me as though I'd suggested flying to the moon, but something in his expression shifted as he studied my face. You're serious? You want to go after armed Sicilian soldiers with what? Good intentions and righteous anger. His skepticism was warranted, but beneath it I heard the faint note of consideration that suggested he was running possibilities through his mind. I want to go after them with everything the Romano family has, plus one advantage they won't expect. I explained my idea quickly, watching Luca's expression cycle through disbelief, calculation, and grudging respect. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it had the benefit of being completely unexpected. More importantly, it was active rather than reactive, taking control instead of waiting for enemies to make the next move. 2 hours later, I stood in an abandoned warehouse on Chicago's South Side, dressed in clothes that Francesca had procured from God knew where. The outfit made me feel like a costume party version of myself, all leather jacket and fitted jeans that bore no resemblance to the elegant dresses I'd grown accustomed to wearing. But the disguise was necessary for what came next. Luca had assembled a team of 12 men, all volunteers who'd served under Dante for years and felt personal loyalty beyond mere employment. Giovanni had provided intelligence about the Torino Stronghold, a repurposed nightclub in a neighborhood where police response times were deliberately slow. Michael coordinated weapons and backup plans while I reviewed building schematics until I could navigate them blindfolded. The plan was elegantly simple, which gave it the best chance of succeeding despite its audacity. I would walk through the front door as though surrendering myself, creating enough confusion and distraction for Luca's team to breach from multiple angles. The key was timing and my ability to sell the performance until the last possible moment. As we prepared to move out, Luca pulled me aside for final instructions. His expression was grim, worry etched in every line of his face. If this goes wrong, if they kill you before we can get inside, Dante will never forgive me. Hell, he'll probably never forgive me anyway for letting you do this. You sure about this, Isabella? I thought about the man who'd held me while I recovered from a bullet wound, who'd introduced me to his world with patience and tenderness, whose whispered endearments had become the soundtrack of my happiness. The man who was probably being tortured at this very moment because enemies saw his love for me as weakness to exploit. I'm sure, I told Luca, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. Let's bring him home. The nightclub squatted on the corner like a predatory animal, its neon signs dark and windows boarded over. But light leaked around the edges of makeshift barriers, and the low throb of music suggested business, as usual despite the late hour. I walked toward the front entrance with measured steps, hands visible and posture non-threatening, while every instinct screamed at me to run. The door was answered by a mountain of a man whose scarred knuckles suggested experience with violence. His eyes narrowed as he took in my appearance, clearly not what he'd been expecting at this hour. What do you want, lady? This is a private club. I'm Isabella. I've come to see Salvatore Torino about my boyfriend. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but they had the desired effect. Recognition flickered in the bouncer's eyes, followed quickly by avarice. He stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy, gesturing me into the club's dimly lit interior. Mr. Torino will be very pleased to see you, Mississippi. Right this way. As we walked deeper into the building, I counted exits and noted the positions of armed men trying to look casual while watching my every move. The layout matched the schematics perfectly, which gave me hope that Luca's team would find their targets when the time came. Salvatore Torino sat in what had once been the club's VIP section, elevated above the main floor and surrounded by leather banquettes that had seen better decades. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 40, with the kind of sharp features that suggested intelligence alongside cruelty. His smile as I approached was all predatory satisfaction. The famous Isabella, he said, rising to greet me with mock courtesy. Please sit. I was hoping we might have a chance to talk. His English carried a heavier accent than Dante's, old country inflections that spoke of recent arrival from Sicily. Can I offer you something to drink? We have excellent wine, imported from my family's vineyards. Where is Dante? I kept my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. Salvatore's smile widened, revealing teeth that had been expensively maintained. Such directness, how refreshing. Your lover is safe, for now. Whether he remains, so depends entirely on how reasonable you prove to be. What do you want? The question came out sharper than intended, but Salvatore seemed pleased by my obvious anxiety. He gestured for me to sit across from him, positioning himself so that I couldn't see the rest of the club's interior. Justice, he said simply. My cousin died because of your boyfriend's arrogance. Blood calls to blood, Miss Isabella. The vendetta must be satisfied. But I am not an unreasonable man. The right tribute, the proper demonstration of respect, and perhaps we can avoid further bloodshed. His words were reasonable, almost civilized, but something in his tone made my skin crawl. This wasn't about justice or family honor. It was about power and the opportunity to humiliate a rival. I could see it in the way his eyes lingered on my face, calculating my value as both symbol and victim. What kind of tribute? I forced myself to lean forward slightly, as though interested in negotiating. Salvatore's satisfaction was palpable as he mistook my positioning for submission rather than preparation. Romano's territory in Little Italy, for starters. My family has business interests that would benefit from expansion into new markets. Then there are the shipping contracts, certain import licenses that could be transferred to more deserving hands. He waved dismissively, as though discussing minor inconveniences rather than demands that would cripple Dante's empire. And if he refuses? The question hung between us while Salvatore's expression hardened into something genuinely frightening. Then we demonstrate what happens to those who forget their place, starting with the people they claim to love. That's when I saw him. Through a gap in the crowd, barely visible in the club's dim lighting, Dante hung suspended from chains attached to an overhead beam. Even from this distance, I could see the evidence of abuse, blood staining his shirt and his head hanging at an angle that suggested unconsciousness. White-hot rage flooded through me, so pure and consuming that for a moment I forgot where I was. Salvatore noticed my reaction and smiled with genuine pleasure. "Ah yes, you can see him from here, can't you? Don't worry, he's still alive. My men know how to extract information without permanent damage, at least not yet. But I confess, my patience has limits." The sound of breaking glass from somewhere deeper in the building made Salvatore's head snap around, confusion flickering across his features. That was Luca's signal, the beginning of the coordinated assault that would hopefully end this nightmare. I had perhaps 30 seconds before chaos erupted and my window of opportunity closed forever. "You made a mistake bringing me here," I told Salvatore, rising from my seat with movements that I hoped appeared calm rather than desperate. His attention snapped back to me, irritation replacing confusion as he processed my words. "I don't think so. You walked in here voluntarily, which makes you either very brave or very stupid. Either way, you're exactly where I need you to be." He gestured and two men stepped forward from positions I hadn't noticed, boxing me in with professional efficiency. "No," I said, backing toward the railing that separated the VIP area from the main floor. "You made the mistake of thinking love makes people weak. That caring about someone makes you vulnerable." The sounds of gunfire erupted from multiple directions as Luca's assault began in earnest, and Salvatore's expression transformed into fury as he realized he'd been played. "You set me up," he snarled, reaching for a gun holstered beneath his jacket. But I was already moving, vaulting over the railing with adrenaline-fueled grace that I'd never possessed before and probably never would again. The 12-foot drop to the main floor sent shockwaves through my legs, but I rolled and came up running toward the area where they were holding Dante. The next few minutes passed in a blur of violence and terror that would replay in my nightmares for months afterward. Luca's men moved through the building with ruthless efficiency, neutralizing threats and securing exits while I fought my way toward the makeshift prison where Dante hung bleeding. Everything I'd learned about survival during my childhood served me now, instinct guiding me through a maze of overturned furniture and desperate men. When I finally reached him, Dante was semi-conscious but aware enough to focus on my face with something approaching disbelief. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" His voice was rough with pain and thirst, but beneath the physical damage I could see the man I'd fallen in love with, battered but unbroken. "Taking you home," I told him as I worked to free his restraints. Luca appeared at my shoulder, rifle in hand and blood on his jacket, but his fierce grin suggested the operation was proceeding according to plan. The chains released with a metallic clatter and Dante collapsed against me, his weight familiar and precious despite the circumstances. "Can you walk?" I asked, supporting him as much as my smaller frame allowed. He nodded grimly, testing his balance while Luca provided cover from the doorway. "We need to move," Luca called over the continuing sounds of conflict. "Giovanni's team has the exit secured, but we've got maybe 5 minutes before police response." The extraction proceeded with military precision, Dante leaning heavily on my shoulder while Luca's team formed a protective corridor toward the exit. I found myself thinking with crystalline clarity, adrenaline sharpening my senses until every detail etched itself into memory with painful precision. The smell of gunpowder and fear, the weight of Dante's body against mine, the way Luca moved with lethal grace through an environment that would have paralyzed me with terror just hours earlier. We made it to the waiting vehicles without further incident, though I could hear sirens approaching in the distance. As we pulled away from the nightclub, I finally allowed myself to truly look at Dante in the SUV's interior lighting. His face was swollen and cut, his shirt torn and bloody, but his eyes held a mixture of relief and something that might have been pride as he studied my appearance. "You came for me," he said quietly, fingers tracing the leather jacket I still wore like armor. "Not just contacted the police or waited for negotiations. You came yourself, with guns and a plan that could have gotten you killed. I don't know whether to be furious or impressed." "Be both," I suggested, settling against his good shoulder while Luca navigated Chicago's late-night streets toward the safety of the mansion. I spent 3 hours planning something that terrified me more than anything I've ever done. But the alternative was sitting in a locked room while someone I love suffered because of me. That wasn't acceptable. His arm tightened around me with careful attention to his injuries, and I felt some of the tension that had sustained me through the evening begin to ebb. The immediate crisis was over, but I understood instinctively that this was just the beginning. By involving myself directly in Romano family business, by proving I could function in Dante's world rather than simply being protected from it, I'd crossed a line that would change everything between us. The mansion welcomed us with warm lights and Francesca's tear-streaked face as she fussed over Dante's injuries while the house doctor was summoned. Over the next several hours, as medical attention was provided and security debriefed, I found myself studying the dynamics of Dante's organization with new understanding. These people weren't just employees or associates. They were family in the truest sense, bound together by loyalty and mutual protection that transcended mere business relationships. Giovanni approached me as dawn painted the sky outside the mansion's windows, his expression thoughtful as he handed me a cup of espresso that I hadn't realized I needed. "What you did tonight, Miss Isabella, it changes things. Not just between you and Dante, but with all of us. You're not just his woman anymore, you're one of us. Family. The responsibility that comes with that position, are you prepared for it?" I considered his question while sipping the perfectly prepared coffee, thinking about how much my life had changed since that night at Cafe Milano. A year ago, I'd been a struggling waitress with simple dreams and modest hopes. Now I was drinking espresso in a Mafia boss's mansion after orchestrating a rescue operation that would have been unthinkable in my previous existence. "I don't know if anyone's ever prepared for this life," I told him honestly. "But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. That has to count for something." Giovanni's smile was warm with approval as he nodded, raising his own cup in a toast that felt like a benediction. "To family," he said simply, "and to the women strong enough to stand beside dangerous men." The words felt like a promise and a warning simultaneously, acknowledgement of what I'd become and what would be expected of me going forward. 2 weeks later, Dante and I stood on the terrace of his Lake Como villa, morning light dancing across water that reflected the changing leaves of early autumn. His physical injuries had healed with remarkable speed, but I could see subtle changes in the way he moved through the world, a new confidence that suggested my actions had shifted something fundamental in how he viewed our partnership. The Torino situation had been resolved with decisive finality. Salvatore and his remaining soldiers had disappeared into the night after the nightclub raid, their venture into Chicago territory ending in complete failure. Word had spread through the appropriate channels that Isabella Romano was under the protection of the entire family organization, making her untouchable to future threats. The surname wasn't official yet, but Dante had introduced me that way at our first public appearance since the rescue, his possessive pride impossible to miss. "Marry me," he said suddenly, the words cutting through the peaceful silence of our morning coffee ritual. "Not because tradition demands it or because the family expects it, but because I want the world to know that you chose this life. That you chose me, knowing everything it means." I turned to study his profile as he gazed out over the lake, noting the tension in his shoulders that suggested this wasn't the casual proposal it might appear to be. This man who commanded absolute loyalty from hundreds of people was nervous about my answer, uncertain despite everything we'd been through together. "You're sure?" I asked, thinking of the girl I'd been just months ago. The one who worried about rent payments and dreamed of normal things like weekend trips and steady paychecks. That person feels like a stranger now, someone I used to know but couldn't return to even if I wanted to. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, he replied, finally turning to face me fully. You saved me in every way a person can be saved, Isabella. Not just from Salvatore's chains, but from an existence where I trusted no one completely, loved nothing enough to risk everything for it. You made me want to be worthy of the devotion you show me every day. His words settled over me like sunlight, warming places in my heart I hadn't realized were still cold with old fears. This dangerous, complicated man loved me with an intensity that should have been frightening, but instead felt like coming home to a place I'd been searching for without knowing it existed. Yes, I said simply, watching his face transform with relief and joy that made him look years younger. Yes to marriage, yes to family, yes to whatever this life brings us. We'll face it together, equal partners in everything that matters. His kiss tasted like promises and future mornings, like the espresso we'd shared and the life we'd continue building one careful choice at a time. When we finally broke apart, both breathless with the magnitude of what we'd just committed to, I saw our reflection in the window behind him. A woman in designer clothes worth more than her old annual salary, standing in the arms of a man whose power could reshape cities, both of them smiling with the confidence of people who'd found exactly where they belonged. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the villa's garden, with Lake Como providing a backdrop that rendered even the most expensive photography unnecessary. Emma flew in from her nursing program, her excitement about my transformation tempered by protective concern that I found endearingly familiar. My mother, significantly healthier thanks to the medical care Dante had provided, wept through the entire ceremony while maintaining that she'd always known I was destined for something extraordinary. The guest list read like a directory of Chicago's most influential families, both legitimate and otherwise. But for all the political implications and business connections being celebrated, the moment when Dante slipped a platinum band onto my finger felt intimate and personal, a promise between two people who'd found love in the most unlikely circumstances. Ti amo per sempre, he whispered against my ear as we danced to music provided by a string quartet flown in from Vienna. Forever and always, my beautiful wife. The endearment in Italian had become natural as breathing, another sign of how completely I'd adapted to his world. Forever and always, I echoed, meaning every word with an intensity that would have terrified the woman I used to be. But that woman no longer existed, replaced by someone stronger, more dangerous, and infinitely more alive than I'd ever imagined possible. As we swayed together in the gathering twilight, surrounded by family both blood and chosen, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this moment. A bullet fired in anger had become Cupid's arrow, violence had transformed into devotion, and a simple act of protective instinct had evolved into a love story that defied every convention I'd previously understood. Looking out over the faces of people who'd accepted me as one of their own, I realized that freedom had never been about the absence of chains, but about choosing which bonds were worth accepting. I'd traded the iron shackles of poverty and powerlessness for golden chains of loyalty and love, and discovered that the right constraints could be more liberating than any solitude. The future stretched before us, uncertain as all futures are but grounded in the absolute certainty of our commitment to each other. There would be challenges, threats, moments when the weight of Dante's world pressed down like a physical burden. But we would face them as we'd faced everything else, together, equal partners in a life that was extraordinary precisely because we'd chosen it freely. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour, their bronze voices carrying across water that reflected the first stars of evening. Mrs. Isabella Romano smiled up at her husband's face, seeing in his amber eyes the same wonder she felt at their impossible, beautiful, dangerous destiny they'd carved from circumstances that should have destroyed them both. The waitress and the Mafia boss had found their happily ever after, written in gunpowder and grace, sealed with blood, and blessed by a love that had transformed them both into something greater than they'd ever dreamed of becoming alone.